Welcome. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University in Montreal. And welcome to my new project. This is a video series about building research relevance. The series is intended for psychologists, teachers, researchers, and others who wish that research was more relevant to the world at large, and that research that is relevant is better integrated into real life and decision making. And so follow me, and in this series, we're going to challenge the assumptions, discuss specific research methods and techniques, discuss clinical techniques, learn how to apply research, begin to develop a culture where the usefulness of research is actually the major criteria for quality. I think I said criterion for quality, and create a sound practice for the benefit of science, communities, students, patients, and clients. So that's what I'm about to do here today. This is the first one, so I'm sure I'll get better at it as we go. But here's where the start is. So, how did this idea begin? Well, I'm a school psychologist by training and by professional identity. I worked as a clinician for 16 years, most of that as lead psychologist at the Children's Hospital in Greenville, South Carolina. When I was there, I helped build internships and postdoctoral residencies. I led medical rotations. When I was there, 80% of my time was in the Department of Developmental Pediatrics and 20% in pediatric oncology. I was occasionally loaned out to other departments too. But really, I ran the department, which was a lot of hiring, firing, and administration, as well as the clinical work. But what I got to see there was how we developed assessment protocols and treatment protocols that were largely based on research, and that research and how it's applied to specific contents. The effort and the goals were clear. It was definitely to be an evidence-based practice. There was this belief that peer-reviewed research is something of a talisman for medical and psychological service delivery. Journal clubs, grand rounds were a big part of this culture. Now, I was troubled by the poor quality of medical research and psychological research, but generally it's a pretty decent arrangement and some valuable goals as we go. Eventually, I got a little burned out of working in a hospital and doing so much management activities, and I totally get the irony that I left that work because I didn't like management, and now I'm a department chair. So yeah, I'm back to being middle management. But I got a little burned out with it at the time. So I did take a job at a school board or a school district. And working in schools was different. The culture was very different. It was more about following regulations, following laws, minimizing risk management, such as grievances and lawsuits against school boards. I remember publishing a paper while I was working for the school board. I received a message that I should probably be doing something better with my time. Evidence was more likely to be used in the policy making, in the making of regulations and laws, but not so much in the day-to-day practice. So that it was a different approach, and I understand it, but it was more of a top-down approach of regulations based on evidence, and then it comes down and we just apply them as to be compliant. That's all we did. And so that's fine. That's just a different model. Now, I had a longtime friend. We sat in classes in graduate school together. We've known each other for 35 years. I hired her once when I was the lead psychologist to come work with me. We even did some private practice together. We've written, presented, generally one of my dearest friends. And she's worked as a clinician. She's worked as a professor. She is actually the best clinician I know. And so after 16 years of clinical work, I decided it was time for a change. Moved to academia. Did I say academia? I meant academia. My daughter gets very upset when I say academia, like it's a nut or something. So, but my friend, when I moved to academia, my friend and colleague was really angry at me. She told me that I was abandoning the kids who needed me. There was nobody else who has the skill set to truly help kids and family the way I can, and that I was going to waste my time going to the academic world by writing papers that are only read by other people who write papers. She said, "You are going to spend the next part of your career being voluntarily irrelevant to the kids you are dedicated to serving and how you've spent your life serving up until now." She yelled at me for about 45 minutes. I think she was really angry at some point because she transitioned into Spanish to swear at me. So she was pretty angry. And when you're told by one of your dearest friends who you respect a lot that you are moving to be voluntarily irrelevant, that hurt quite a bit. And I was quite convinced that wasn't going to be the case. Now I've been an academic for 19 years. And so this will be just finishing up my 19th year as a university professor. And I have to acknowledge that largely she was right. I have written a lot of papers that have been read by other people who write papers, and they get cited, and that's fine. That's the metric we use in academia. But the truth is, it's not really relevant to the kids we worked with. So I've learned a lot as an academic. And so now we're going to start talking about how we can move from being voluntarily irrelevant, which is what a lot of research is, to now being relevant, how clinicians and teachers can use research in a productive way, how we can move away from the idea that most clinicians, psychologists, teachers, whatnot, don't read academic journals. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because because they don't have time, or their even access, which is a big issue that we'll talk about at some point. But even access isn't the biggest issue. The biggest issue is why read them. The research that's published is not at all relevant to what they're doing. So many of you probably are familiar with me from social media, where I just talk about coffee and I shit post on social media. I really decided to become more of a public nuisance and really attack what's happened in some of the academic world, how we publish papers, how we research papers, what methods we use. And it's not enough to attack and tear down. I'm not a fan of that. I would rather build up new ideas and build up new ways to go. So what we're going to do today is, this is just the beginning. And what I'm going to do is do a trial project that goes from now until about the end of March. We'll have about 25 of these little videos. Some will just be me yammering like I am now. Some will be interviews. Some will be specific techniques. So we'll talk a lot about those sorts of things. But ultimately, this was in large part, the detail was inspired by a paper maybe 10, 15 years ago by a guy named Matthias Binswanger, who I have no idea who this person is. Good scholar and a real scathing critic of all of science and the way it's done at universities. He was talking about, in his chapter, he wrote a lot about fraud in science, which is an issue that we'll talk about. And he said that fraud's probably a big issue in natural sciences. He goes, because social sciences takes fraud to a whole new step. He wrote, in social sciences, research is often of such a high degree of irrelevance that it doesn't matter whether the result is faked or not. It does not matter one way or the other. That's a brutal indictment, and it's not untrue to a large degree. Except, remember, I'm a clinician. I'm a school psychologist. We're supposed to use evidence-based practices. It's in the American law. It's in our professional ethics. It is in our professional job responsibilities to use evidence-based practices, whatever that means. And a lot of this video series will be defining that. But we still make decisions to some degree based on research. If the research is not credible, not relevant, or in other ways not as transparent as it could be, we're actually doing work that affects children, especially in school psych. I mean, many of you will work with adults too, but if we do not consider the credibility of research, we're doing practices that may do harm to kids. So I don't always agree with, in fact, I don't agree very often with the Binswanger, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but the Binswanger really cynical approach. But I do acknowledge there's problems, and I do acknowledge that we need to build something new and better. Because right now, even even the research that's supposed to be directly relevant, like randomized control trials and things like this and evaluation studies, they're still not particularly useful. So are we going to give up the idea of research that influences clinical practice or changes culture and policy? I don't think so. I think we can improve the credibility of research. We can improve the relevance of research, and I have some specific approaches and ideas how to do this. So this is just the introduction, but I'm hoping that any clinician, any teacher who takes evidence-based practices seriously, students who are learning about research and how to be a good scientist practitioner or even a scholar practitioner, what kind of approaches do you need to take? What are the barriers, pitfalls, opportunities that are available for you? For researchers who are already experienced but we're looking to build on the relevance of their work. And for a lot of it's going to be about knowledge translation too. So how do we get research from the relevant state in a journal to actual practice in a therapy room or a classroom or things of that nature? So what I'll be doing is I'll be posting twice a week with 15-minute talks. Typically I'll be posting on Mondays and Fridays, like I said, from January till about the end of March. I'll probably post a little bit on Instagram, but most of the videos will live on YouTube or on my website, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. For those of you who are looking for the website, it is in the notes below, the program notes. And what I'll be doing is either yammering away at a topic like I am now. We'll be doing a technical step-by-step how-to approach on a research design or a how to apply something in a specific setting. And then I'll be doing some interviews too. We have many scholars out there who really have a lot of ideas on research credibility, on things like replication, on things like knowledge translation, a lot of very skilled people. But mostly what I really want to do is show my friend Doris that I did not abandon kids, but there are different ways to serve. And I didn't want to be voluntarily irrelevant without doing something that's going to reach a lot of people. And I do know that even though papers get cited, they're read by a very small audience. And mostly that audience is, as Doris said, other people who write papers. So I look forward to going on this journey with you. Let's have some fun with it. It should be a great deal of at least interesting ideas, I'm hoping, and we'll go. And hopefully I'll get a little bit better at the idea of broadcasting and recording. This is sort of a new concept for me. So what I'll do is I will see you on Friday, where the topic will be, are psychologists, researchers, and technicians professionals or merely technicians? So I'll leave that with you, and I will see you on Friday. Thanks so very much, and I look forward to talking with you and hearing some of your ideas on this topic. Bye-bye.